Hi there, it's Kevin with Roguedeckbuilder.com here with a new little video series I'm going to be doing. It's going to be an outreach to the community. Big shout out to Daniel Grace for this idea. I've got an article up on Roguedeckbuilder.com explaining the cube, so I'm not going to go over explaining this too much. What we're going to do is we're going to build a community cube, and each person is going to add one card and then 5 cards to support that card. And what we're looking for is amazing interactions, not really power level, but just fun little interactions that can go into a cube draft strategy. If you're not familiar with what a cube is kind of like a personalized draft that you build. So what you do is you get to put cards into your cube, and of course you want cards that usually interact really well. And that's exactly what we're going for here. And then you sit down and you actually draft the cube. And there's a number of other ways to play cube, but that's the version of cube that we're going to use. So we're going to shoot for like 400 or 500 cards that will go into this cube. And then when it is completed, we're actually going to tape some videos of us playing the cube on MTGO. So I mean, cube drafting works just like a normal draft, as you're going to draft usually 40-45 cards and then build a 40 card deck out of it. So anywho, again, I'll explain more of it on the website, and then we'll have all the other YouTube personalities that want to be involved in it. I'll have their articles up on Rogue Deck Builder and show their videos on their channel of what cards they're going to add to the cube. So hopefully this is going to be a massive collaboration. It'll help get exposure to all the other YouTube channels, help unite us. And I think this will be a fun way to do it. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to show you my 5 choices. And lo and behold, it's not Immortal Servitude, for all of you people that thought it's going to be Immortal Servitude. Immortal Servitude, although is one of my favorite cards ever printed, it isn't my favorite card ever printed. My absolute favorite card in Magic the Gathering, the history of Magic the Gathering, is Oversold Cemetery. Oversold Cemetery says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And it's only 2 mana. I absolutely love this card. I wish that Wizards would reprint this in Standard or Modern. I'd brew around this like crazy. This is probably my favorite deck that I ever played during the good old Onslaught and Mirrodin days, is when I played this card. So anyway, a lot of the cards that I chose are going to be reminiscent of that Onslaught / Mirrodin. And I've also added a few other cards from more of a modern age that I think go great with this card. Again, that's the goal of this, is to find cards that interact very well. So I decided to put creatures. I know there's plenty of other cards that work with Oversold Cemetery that aren't creatures, that put creature cards into the graveyard. But I decided for this cube, since I'm only allowed to add 5, that all 5 of them are going to be creatures that interact well. The first one of these, any good rock strategy needs a way to rock is kind of a black-green graveyard recursion strategy. That's what it originally was called. Now it's kind of synonymous with anything that's black and green, but originally what it did have utilized some sort of value or graveyard recursion. So anywho, my first card is going to be Ravenous Baloth, because any good rock strategy needs a way to stabilize, and Ravenous Baloth I think is the best one out of the options. Now there was some other options besides Ravenous Baloth, but this one has a built-in sack outlet. You can also sack other beasts if you happen to have other beasts in the deck, and you gain 4 life. So again, this is a card I'd love to see reprinted for Modern. And again, we do have other, let me find my life gains here. There's definitely some other life gained cards that we could put in the cube, but like Kitchen Finks, card is incredibly powerful. I'm sure another person might add this. So of course I'm not going to do Kitchen Finks. Plus it doesn't have its built-in sack outlet, which is huge. Plus Persist it's coming back to the battlefield before it ends up going to the graveyard. Now, a lot of these cards you either want enter the battlefield effects or dies effect. So, I mean, you have Centaur Safeguard, and when it dies, you gain 3 life. But again, I like Ravenous Baloth over it. And Darkheart Sliver, it's a sliver, and it's kind of very similar to Ravenous Baloth, but I'm sure we might have a sliver strategy in the cube. Who knows? So I decided to go with Ravenous Baloth, a little more flavorful. And then like Gutless Ghoul, you can actually sacrifice any creature to gain 2 life. Bottle Gnomes, you can sacrifice it to gain 3 life. Brindle Boar, again, you can sacrifice it to gain 4 life. And Gristleback is very similar to that as well. So some of these, again, either enter the battlefield, die, or you can actually sacrifice it to make the life gain happen. Again, Obstinate Baloth is very similar to this as well, but again, Ravenous Baloth gets the nod. Now, speaking of which, either enter the battlefield or leaves the battlefield. Here's 2 in 1. We have good old Solemn Simulacrum. So Solemn Simulacrum does a ton of things here. When it comes into play, you get advantage out of it. You can ramp, go get a land and put it on the battlefield. When it dies, you get to draw a card. So it's perfect for Oversold Cemetery. You get a card in the graveyard, which is awesome to return back to your hand. You get a advantage when it comes into play and when it dies. So of course it has to get the nod. It was one of the pivotal pieces in the Oversold Cemetery deck. I'm sure this is a card we want to see in Cube because it's awesome. It's first draft pickable, and it's a very, very awesome, flavorful card, so I decided to include it. There's some other cards that I definitely thought could go in this instead of like Solemn Simulacrum for the ramp. I have a bunch of ramp type cards here, which like this one's cool. It's Verdant Eidolon. You can add 3 mana of any color to your mana pool, and then whenever you cast a multicolor spell, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand, or you can just get it back with Oversold Cemetery. Yavimaya Elder was a close second to Solemn Simulacrum, because when it dies, you may search for up to 2 basic land cards, put them in your hand, and then it has its own way to sacrifice itself to draw a card. So it's very similar to Solemn Simulacrum. I'm hoping it finds a way into the cube, because again, it's a great card with Oversold Cemetery, but unfortunately, it did not get the nod over Solemn Simulacrum. And again, I have this Yavimaya Granger, which when it enters the battlefield, you get to search for a basic land, and then you just don't pay the echo, and then it goes to your graveyard. Burnished Heart's very similar as well. Cards like Dawntreader Elk are similar. Diligent Farmhand, Sylvan Ranger, Pilgrim's Eye. You kind of get the idea, but I think Solemn Simulacrum was the right choice here. And the secondary ability too of drawing a card, you find this in like this Heart Warden, and actually I'm going to talk about this with my next pick. We'll go over to Secure Tri-Builder actually before we start talking about it. So I also wanted another way to ramp, and because this deck is going to utilize a ton of mana. Like when I had the Oversold Cemetery, the more mana the merrier, because you could be casting multiple things. I mean, you could be casting a natural card that you're going to be drawing from your hand, and then hopefully you're going to get that Oversold Cemetery. And it is very mana intensive. So one of those cards that's perfect, that again gets you card advantage, and has a way to sacrifice itself, is Secure Tribe Elder. And this one is when you can sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land, put the card in play, tap, shelf your library. So a lot of times it ends up chump blocking, help stabilizing, and eventually you can it's an option to get back. And so cards that are very similar to that I thought of were like I guess this would be more online to Secure Tri-Builder, and this pile here would be very similar to kind of the Solemn Simulacrum. We have Wall of Mulch, which you can sacrifice it to draw a card, and it's a 0/4. We have the Heart Warden, which you can tap for mana, sacrifice, draw a card. This actually looks kind of like a commander deck in the making, doesn't it? And then this one, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. You don't have to pay the echo cost. So there was a ton of different options here. I'll just scroll through them kind of slowly so you can see kind of what I was thinking about putting in, rather than either Secure Tri-Builder, or I might as well talk about Alchemist Apprentice. Alchemist Apprentice, I thought I'd add a blue card because I don't want this to automatically go into a black-green strategy. You can also go into a blue strategy. I'm sure there will be plenty of ways to self-mill with blue and with black in the cube, and I thought I'd add a blue a card to the cube rather than just go all out black green. So that's the main reason for putting Alchemist Apprentice in here. Again, it's got a natural way to sacrifice itself. It can chump block, sacrifice, and it's a card you can get back from Oversold Cemetery. So that is the reason for those ones. Now on to the next one was Phyrexian Plague Lord. I actually wanted a way to sacrifice other creatures, and this one got the nod because it was one of my favorite cards in the Rock deck. You can sacrifice itself to give a creature -4/-4, or you can sacrifice just any old creature to give a creature -1/-1 until end of turn. So very good synergy between the Solemn Simulacrum, as you can actually have an outlet to, and it comes out the following turn. So Solemn Simulacrum into Phyrexian Plague Lord was a very, very common occurrence in the deck, and then you could take out one of your opponent's creatures. and put Solemn Simulacrum into the bin. So anyway, those are my choices. I'm going to go over some cards again that did not quite make the cut. Eternal Witness, the power level on this is a bit maybe too high, but I'm sure this might end up making the cube through other people's strategies. Doom Necromancer, again, is really cool because you can sacrifice a return target creature card from your graveyard to your battlefield. But that's more of a reanimation strategy, not really an Oversold Cemetery. Oversold Cemetery isn't reanimating, it's getting card advantage. So that is I decided not to put it in the deck. Now this pile is a bunch of cards that sacrifice themselves, kind of utility cards. So you have like cards like Elvish Hex Hunter that you can sacrifice to destroy target enchantment. This is the exact same as Lyrist. Scrapper gets an artifact. So does Scavenger Folk. Augur Skulls gets cards out of your opponent's graveyard. Corpse Hauler gets a card back from your graveyard to your hand. Throw Surgeon gets a card out of your opponent's hand. Verdant Zealot destroys either an artifact or an enchantment. This was a close inclusion because this was in the original deck. Elf Replica, which is also in the original deck. You can kill an enchantment. Plus, it's an artifact, so you can actually go for an Oversold Cemetery artifact route, which there's tons of cards available for that could be a cube strategy. Then we have the Sylvan Replica that gets an artifact or an enchantment, so it probably is just a bit better than Elvish Replica. Oh, and this is an elf, and if you see a little common occurrence here, a lot of these cards are elves. Fulminator Mage, which destroys an on-basic land. Very, very powerful and modern. Didn't quite make the cut. Again, this would be an awesome card to include in the cube. We have the Assassin, which you can sacrifice itself to destroy target non-black creature, and it's got kind of this cool recover ability that, I mean, if you have to, you can pay half your life, recover it, and kill another black creature. So awesome in a rock-type deck. Then we have Blood Speaker, which you could sacrifice it to find a demon. That is pretty cool, but again, that would have to be more of a demon strategy, which I'm sure other people could come up with like some demon cards to add to the cube. Then we have Shriek Maw, which is really cool because I really like the evoke mechanic because you're evoking into the graveyard and then you can get it back with Oversold Cemetery. See how cool Oversold Cemetery would be in a modern deck? It could kind of go alongside Birthing Pod. Come on, Wizards, if you're watching this, reprint me Oversold Cemetery. I'm begging you. Such an awesome card. It sucks that it does not see any legacy play and is just sitting collecting dust and not seeing any other play. I will brew the crap out of this card if they print it in Modern. So then I thought about other cards. I guess Fume Spitter belongs in this pile as well, because these are all cards that can sacrifice themselves and get some sort of value. Now this next pile was cards that could sacrifice other creatures. Again, Plague Lord was the one that I decided to. Is he wearing a kilt? Looks like this monster dude's wearing a kilt here. Anyway, I thought this was the most flavorful one. But you have cards like Viscera Seer, they can sack a creature. Plague Rusalka can sack a creature. Again, these are all the cards that would utilize like Simulacrum or other cards that come into play and gain some sort of advantage, and you want back in the graveyard to then Oversold Cemetery. Then we have Starved Rusalka, which we can gain a life off sacrificing a creature. And the Bone Reader, target player discards a card. We have Destroying Non-Black Creatures. We have the Scourge of Skull of Ale, which is kind of cool because this is the only time it really see plays in any sort of cube or casual or limited. But I really like this ability. You put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that creature's power onto the Scourge. So your idea is to get this guy huge and trample 2/2 that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Varls, which you can sacrifice to regenerate it. Plus you can scavenge. I mean, if you start getting way more than 4, it might be a good idea to start scavenging stuff. Hell's Caretaker, which you can sacrifice a creature, return a creature. Again, rock type strategy is huge. We have Braid's Cobble Minion. And this is pretty cool because in this type of deck, you don't care. You'll have plenty of creatures out, and you can always, again, sacrifice something that's already given you value, and then you're going to be getting back a creature to cast. So Braids is awesome in this list. As upkeep, they have to sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land. Again, you'll be ditching a creature. They'll hopefully have to be ditching something better than you're ditching. We have Savra, which works really cool because whenever you sacrifice a black creature, We have so many black creatures. You make your opponent sacrifice a creature. And whenever you sacrifice a green creature, you can gain 2 life. So that would be an awesome inclusion. Jared, which gets creatures equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard, and then again is another sack outlet. Corpse Harvester, you can go get a zombie in a swamp. That seems pretty cool. Scarecrow, and this, I really want to see a Scarecrow like tribal in the cube. That'd be awesome. And this one's really cool. Sacrifice a Scarecrow, draw a card. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's very powerful. Return target card from your graveyard to your battlefield. This is an instant speed. Blightsteel Colossus hits the graveyard. Before it shuffles back in, you just return it back from your graveyard to the battlefield. A little too slow for Modern, as there are other ways to cheat in through Gory's Vengeance and other stuff, but this would be awesome in Limited. So really cool card. And then I also thought about stuff that actually gains value whenever stuff is sacrificed. This Mortician Beetle, you could get just as a 1-drop, could get very, very out of control as time goes on. So again, I'll just quickly go over the other cards that did not quite make the cut. We have Disciple Bull, one of my favorite cards ever printed. It would work very great in this deck. Again, other ways to draw cards and sacrifice those creatures. I think I already went over that pile and kind of went over this ramp pile as well. So here is another pile I thought would be kind of cool that happens when things die. So when Festering Newt dies, it gives a creature -1/-1. So these are great targets to sacrifice, or they interact with stuff when things die. And yes, again, in an artifact Oversold Cemetery type route, you have Mirror Retriever that would then, when it died, return another artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And then, of course, you can get advantage to Oversold Cemetery. Paris Mirror, when it dies, 2 damage. Black Cat gets a card out of their hand. Blood Arse, whenever a creature dies. Of course, you guys are familiar with this card because this is one of my favorite cards. And Zathor Necromancer, again, whenever a human dies, you put a zombie into play. Now, this one these didn't quite make the cut because, again, these are more of like a dredge type or self-mill type strategy, which I think might be included. Another person might actually go this route, so we might see these cards get included into the cube. But Bloodline Shaman's really cool. You can reveal cards from the top of your library. Reveal a top card. If it's that creature card or chosen type, you put it in your hand, otherwise in your graveyard. It helps you self-mill. It gets card advantage. There's tons of elves in here. Humans, whatever you want to build a deck around. We have Hermit Druid, which is very, very powerful. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land and put all the rest of the cards in your graveyard. So it's a way to fill up your graveyard. Again, Satyr Wayfinder is kind of the same thing. We have Wirewood Herald. When it dies, you may search your library for an elf card. Actually, this belongs in that pile. And put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. So again, you could go kind of an Oversold Cemetery elf route. Again, Brindle Stout's in this pile. When it dies, put a 3/3. I guess this was more of a death pile here as well. I like this Driver of the Dead. When it dies, return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Again, that'd work great with Alchemist's Apprentice. So who knows too, maybe when we get close to the conclusion of the cube, we'll add some of these cards. Maybe I'll have some people vote on cards to, I'm gonna put it open to the YouTube, all the YouTube personalities, as well as Roguedeckbuilder staff, to actually create this list. And then at the end, we'll probably leave it up to the fans to then vote cards to actually include into the cube. So keep these in mind when we're thinking about voting a card in. And maybe that will be a weekly thing. At the end of the week, we'll vote in a few cards to go into the cube. Alrighty, so, and then I thought about cycling as another route too. And this Undead Gladiator barely didn't make the cut because this was in the original deck as well. Because you'd always end up cycling this guy and then discarding an unused card to return it back to your graveyard to your hand. And then you could keep cycling it for Oversold Cemetery. It was just a really, really, really good strategy that you could... There's other cards you can use that when you discard, like Madness strategies that could go along with Undead Gladiator. So you'd return Undead Gladiator from graveyard to your hand by discarding a Madness card that then you could put in for free, and then you could cycle Undead Gladiator, and then again rinse and repeat that process. And I'm sure there's some really, really cool card combinations that could be utilized with Undead Gladiator and kind of this rock recursion type strategy. Then again, there's always is Dredge. Dredge itself. When we talked about dredge, cards that kind of dredge, self-mill. Then there's Dredge, which Graveshell Scarab would work awesome in this deck. So would like Stinkweed Imp, as it dredge 5s. I don't know if we'd want Golgari Grave Troll. It has some dredge strategies to get out of hand, but I guess if it's in the limited format, it probably wouldn't have all the pieces for Golgari Grave Troll to get completely out of hand. But dredge 6 is huge. Yeah, and then a +1/+1 counter for each creature card in your graveyard. I'm sure that this card could even be paired with like a +1/+1 strategy where you're removing counters, adding counters, things like that is relevant. Then we have the Brown Scale, which is another dredger. So I just thought about those might be a pretty cool inclusion into the cube as well. Then we have, again, this is more of discarding cards. So that's my last little pile that I thought there was like, so this strategy is where you discard cards. Again, it could go with the Madness type strategy, and then it gives you card advantage. So it's a way to fill up your graveyard for Oversold Cemetery. So we got Green Seeker, which gets a basic land. We have Pack Rat that gets a token. We got Undertaker, which gets a creature back from your graveyard to your hand. We have the Seer, which draws a card and visits a land card, discard it. We have Fauna Shaman, which would be awesome in this deck. Discard a creature card, search library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. I'm sure this will end up in the cube. Someone will pick that as their card. Then we have Silverglade Pathfinder. Search library for basic land card, put it in play, tap, shuffle your library by discarding card, and then cards like Law of the Troll. So anyway, there's tons of other cards. This was just a brief example of cards I considered and gives you an overall flavor of what I want out of the cube. Again, let's just go over my picks. My pick is Oversold Cemetery, and then Ravenous Baloth, Solemn Simulacrum, Phyrexian Plague Lord, Phyrexian Kiltwear, Secure Tribe Elder, and Alchemist Apprentice. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and then again, you can suggest cards we add into the cube, and then again, I think we will do a voting process. I don't know when, maybe once per week, of a card that we are adding or a couple cards we are adding to the cube. This has been Kevin with Roguedeckbuilder.com. If you would like to, if you're a YouTuber and would like to be featured on the Rogue Cube, shoot me an email and we'll see if we can collaborate. Thanks for watching.